This is Rogers TV. The opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Politics. I'm Debra Hutchison in the Rogers TV studio. Our guest this week, joining us via Zoom, is Oshawa MP Colin Carrie. Thanks so much for making time for us today.
Oh, are you kidding? It's always great to be on your show and to connect with people from Durham Region. It's not a bad day here in Oshawa, so that's kind of nice. No more snow.
Yeah, let's, knock wood, we don't get a lot more for a while.
How long will that last, eh?
Not long. All right,
Good.
So much to talk about. Let's get into it. Let's start with your private members bill. As this airs, you have already made the announcement. A private members bill in regards to victims' rights. Let's talk about that. Exactly what are you hoping to accomplish with this private members bill?
Well, more transparency and equal treatment for victims. You mentioned it's my private members bill, but I really would like to say a local victims advocate. I don't know if you've ever met Lisa Freeman, but her father was axe murdered back in 1991. And this private members bill, actually, the idea comes from her. And it would give victims more openness and transparency through the parole process, which has even gotten worse, by the way, Deborah, through this COVID crisis, where we've seen convicted criminals, murderers, rapists have more rights than the victims and the victims' families as far as getting victims' impact statements on the record, things like that. So this bill would give more transparency to victims' families in writing, so they would know about eligibility, early parole, and give them opportunities to move forward with their own victim impact statements so they can have input into the process. It's a very small change. I tried to get this bill tabled in the last parliament, and I was able to get my colleague Lisa Raitt to do it then. And this year, we've had Senator Pierre Boisvenu, who is a very well-known victims advocate. He's tabled it in the Senate on Tuesday this week. He's doing his maiden speech in the Senate today. And we're hoping, because it is a nonpartisan bill, that perhaps we could even make it into law. When I spoke in the House and when we spoke in the House last Parliament, it seemed like the NDP were on side and the Liberals seemed open to it. So let's keep our fingers crossed, and this would be a great initiative that was brought forward by someone from Oshawa that would really make the lives easier for victims, because the last few years it's really gotten out of whack between the Liberals getting very soft on crime versus the rights of the people who are actually affected by these horrible crimes.
Now, Lisa, she was caught off guard about was it an early parole hearing?
Yes, and the sadness with that, when they first put this murderer up for parole, they actually transferred him to a facility that was 10 kilometers away from her sister's, where her sister now lived, and they didn't find out about it till 24 hours after the fact. And Lisa was ready to go for a parole hearing this spring, and of course COVID happened. And the criminal had all access to the lawyers, the Zoom, the connectivity issues, and victims weren't even allowed to phone in at the beginning. They weren't allowed to use video conferencing like you and I are doing now. But if we can do it safely, you and I, why couldn't victims participate in the process in that regard? And the criminals are allowed in-person visits. So if it's safe for a prisoner to have an in-person visit, why can't a victim be able to give their victims' impact statements and confront the person that changed their life forever? And as you know, Lisa was only 21 when this horrible murder took place that took away an innocent man, her father. And she says basically victims live with these horrible losses every single day of their lives. And to be re-victimized by the parole system, of the system that's supposed to protect them and give them rights, is something that most Canadians don't realize goes on. And when she tells her story, Deborah, Canadians can't believe what kind of system we have here in Canada and how it's been so much skewed towards the criminals versus the victims and their families. And we need to do everything possible to support these victims and their families to make sure that they have equal representation at least and transparency through the system and not be re-victimized by the very system that's supposed to be protecting them.
Yeah, I don't understand why she couldn't give a victim's statement. It's not like she had to be there in person.
You know what? And that's we called it out. I asked questions in the House. The minister basically said that she would have the right for video conferencing and phone, and that was wrong. They just actually a few weeks ago had a pilot project for the video conferencing. All the while, the criminals could have video conferencing with members of the parole board, with their lawyers, etc. Why they wouldn't include the victims in this just goes to show you how skewed the system is. And this is it's not going to fix the system, Deborah, but it's going to move it one step further. And I'm happy to say that I may be working with Lisa on another bill that would just allow victims, and again, it won't help her, but in the future, as you mentioned, the parole hearings would make them more open and transparent so that victims will, moving forward in Canada, be able to participate fully. And that's a private member's bill that we've started working on already. And we'll have to see how it makes it through the process to become law.
So now you said it has been tabled?
Yes,
Okay.
it's been tabled in the Senate. And as I was saying, Senator Boisvenu will be doing a speech today, and we're hoping that it goes through the Senate process, then gets sent to the House. I'm going to be sending it over to Minister Blair, who under his control is the parole board, to see if the Liberals would be open to accepting it. And for me, people call it my private member's bill. Well, I had something to do with it. We did draft it. But for me, it's not important that I put it through. The importance is that we make a difference for victims who are being re-victimized by a system that's not fair. So however this gets through, I'm happy to work with members across the aisle, members from the Senate, in order to make a real difference for people who, for them, this is a daily occurrence they have to live with.
So the bill says exactly what? How does it improve life for victims of violence?
Very, very simple changes. It would give written reasons why in this case with Lisa, a convicted murderer, what he has done to be allowed to have early parole, and also determine how they came up with the dates in order for the process to go through, and allow the victim at that time. And in her case, as she talks about in her book, she thought he'd be there for 25 years, and she just found out, 20 years he was going to be up for parole. And she said that shock and being re-victimized like that is very traumatic. And this would simply be more transparency for victims who are caught in this horrible situation that was always beyond their control, so that the system's more fair and allows them to understand when those dates were chosen and what eligibility criteria were used and what the convicted inmate has done to actually earn early parole.
Timeline. When perhaps could it be made law?
That I'm optimistic. I spoke to Senator Boisvenu, of course. He's going to work to get it through the Senate, which means then it would come back into the House. And keep your fingers crossed. Hopefully we're not going to be having an early election this spring, but hopefully it could get through the House process. And if I can work to get unanimous consent, or the Liberals actually deciding that they would be in favor of this, I'm hoping that it could become law as early as the spring. So let's keep our fingers crossed and think optimistically, Deborah.
Okay. Let's move on to, so much. Let's talk about what's really making news on Parliament Hill as well. All, of course, COVID related, but the vaccination procurement plan and the situation. The federal government says it has been proactive in reaching out to getting access to a whole bunch of different vaccines, should we get approval. But now we're talking about the fact that even if we can get our hands on them, we can't make them here.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say instead of talking about a plan for vaccines, it's a no plan. And we've been asking in the House consistently, pressuring the government how they're going to roll this out. It's just been a litany of bumbling and dithering by this government. I know they haven't really been held to account because the Prime Minister did cancel Parliament in the spring, and then he prorogued. So we've been working hard to make sure that Canadians are there with other countries around the world so that things are done efficiently and any available treatment and preventions are available to Canadians. But we could go on and on, Deborah. We all know that early in the pandemic, they sent our PPE to China. And then we got moldy, horrible quality PPE sent back. I had local constituents complain that it smelled of urine and mold, the things that they were getting. So we were delayed in getting PPE, which would allow people to get into work and get back into some type of normalcy. The early testing was again bungled. The United States and Europe had approved many of these early quick tests for COVID-19. They were using them in the spring. Health Canada just approved them just weeks ago. And, full disclosure, Deborah, I've gone down just to the over on Bond and King where I got tested for COVID because my mom is in a senior's residence. Like many
Right.
Canadians, we want to spend time with our loved ones who have basically been stuck in these residences for months and months on time. And I went to visit my mom this week, and they told me that instead of a 14-day test, you had to have a 7-day test. You had to be tested within 7 days to come in and see your mom. And as a primary caregiver, it is something that I'm able to do now. For the first few months, we weren't able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it just makes it difficult when the tests that I get down here in Oshawa, they tell you in writing, they say it can take up to 7 days to get the test results. So then it's too late. Then I won't be able to see my mom. And Canadians are worried because over Christmas, this is a time to spend with your family and loved ones, and especially seniors, my mom being 92, and many people not in the best health are stuck in these seniors residences without having the ability to have rapid testing, which literally, Deborah, would be a game changer. You could have a rapid
Mm-hmm.
test when you went in. Workers could have rapid tests as soon as they come in. And these outbreaks that we've heard of in seniors residents, I think over 80% of people, 85% of people have died of COVID in Canada were from seniors residences. But for the safety effect, and now this vaccine rollout, it's ridiculous. They made a huge announcement, I think in May, saying that they would be investing $20 million to increase capacity and manufacturing capacity locally. And they signed an agreement with CanSino, a Chinese manufacturing vaccine facility, a very unique one, but they didn't expand and diversify where we were getting our vaccines from. And until that deal fell through, of course, in August, and they didn't even try to sign contracts with other companies till the end of August.
Okay,
So
I'm going to have to stop you there. They're telling me we
sure.
have to go to break. So hold
Okay.
that thought. We'll be
Yes.
right back with our conversation with Oshawa MP Colin Carrie after this.
Yeah.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Operation Smile, alongside our medical volunteers, provides safe cleft surgery to children free of charge thanks to generous donors like you. That was until we fell into a pandemic.
If you only knew what I'm going.
By December, tens of thousands more children will be waiting for surgery. Please help us keep our promise and deliver smiles to children in need when surgeries resume.
The LGBTQ plus community is full of artistry, talents, and inspiring stories. So sit back and enjoy our fun, casual, and intimate chats with artists and creative folks on the longest running LGBTQ plus talk show in local history, and one that has been called a very important show. We love you. Thank you for watching.
Hi, I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Allison.
Coming up on the next parenting show, we're talking about how to tackle sleep issues.
We're all having sleep issues. We'll help you get through.
That's only on Rogers TV.
Welcome back to Talk Politics. Our guest this week is Oshawa MP Colin Carrie. Colin, when we went to break, we were talking about the fact that Canada has no domestic vaccine production capacity currently.
Yeah, and I was talking about how the Liberals signed an exclusive deal with a company, Sino-Canadian, whose executives now, we find out, have been investigated by CSIS for, things that for security reasons. But that was done, an investment was done for $20 million. And you just have to wonder why our prime minister would think that he should give exclusive rights and facility to make our vaccine with a Chinese company like the Communist Party of China. It makes no sense at all. And when the deal fell through in August, that's when they started to try to procure vaccines from other countries. And it's at a situation right now, Deborah, that there's going to be 2.7 billion people around the world vaccinated or have opportunity for vaccination before Canadians. The Americans and British are talking about rolling out their plans this week. We've been asking in the House, where is their plan? How are they going to get these vaccines out to Canadians who need them? Who's going to be getting them first? And the information, they have absolutely no information. Even the freezers, some of these vaccines have to be kept so cold. We should be procuring freezers and ways to work with our military in order to get things out. So, these overall complete lockdowns are not the solution. We have to learn to live with this and get past this pandemic. And every single way, it seems that this government has not been able to come up and make decisions and get things moving in a timely manner. And our worry is that Canadians are going to be left behind many places from around the world.
Now, I have talked to some liberal MPs about this, and they make the point that we used to have several companies that were domestic vaccine producers, but they left. And the question was, why did they leave? And the answer that came back to me was, ask the government that was in power when they were allowed to leave and nothing was done.
Well, again, this is Liberals just blaming the Harper government. That's their favorite thing. They've been in government for over 5 years. And the reality, early in the spring, they said we would have domestic manufacturing. So now that they've messed that up, they just want to blame another government 5 years ago. And the reality is there was a pandemic plan. They didn't even follow the plan. There was a whole idea of how to move forward with Canada. Look at our research. And they disbanded the Canadian organization that did this for us last year. That was their decision. And part of managing your way through a pandemic is to make sure that you do have domestic rights. And they didn't even negotiate domestic rights to make the vaccines here in Canada. So, like I said, this is a litany of failures. And of course, the Liberal plan for all of that is always to blame somebody else, because it's certainly, in their viewpoint, nothing's ever their fault. But I think Canadians are starting to get tired of that excuse. And the reality is we have worked with them throughout this entire pandemic with the benefits, for example, that were given to Canadians. We supported them. It was about $178 billion worth of benefits giving out to Canadians because that was the right thing to do. We did offer improvements, and happy to say eventually The Liberals did take our advice and they changed the programs. They made them a little bit more flexible so that businesses could stay open. Individuals who had mortgages to pay were not being left without money to feed themselves and to pay for rent over their heads. So that part of it is something that we've been very supportive of. What we're trying to do, though, is get more openness and transparency from this government. Where did the rest of the money go? And we had an economic update this week. As you probably heard, it was in the news with Chrystia Freeland. This government has gone the longest ever in Canadian history without even giving us a budget. And again, it was just more about let's give more and more money out the door without having openness and transparency of where it's going to end. Because we're looking at a situation in Canada now, Deborah, where we don't have the paychecks, we don't have productivity, we don't have competitiveness. And that was a problem before the pandemic. This economic update has done absolutely nothing to improve that situation. And we're moving from a paycheck economy where people were working and having paychecks to a credit card economy. Now, each and every one of us owes more and more money that has to be paid back, that will need to be managed moving forward. And again, they've gotten rid of all their fiscal anchors. You know, it used to be deficits, debt to GDP ratios, that when our government left, we had a surplus and we had a very solid debt to GDP ratio. And it's going up. I think this year it's going to be 55%. To put that into perspective, it's only been worse one time in the past, and that was after the economic disasters of the 80s and 90s, where another Trudeau was at the helm. And we were at a point where it was 67%. And that's where we're saying this is the fiscal cliff. People won't lend us money. We won't be able to manage the economy. And it's very, very close to that right now. And again, sadly, there is no plan to get us back to a reasonable financial spending habits.
I also want to talk to you about, you have a role on the Veterans Affairs Committee, working with local veterans organizations. We've spoken with them here on several of our shows here on Rogers TV about their struggles during COVID, and that, you know, some of the Royal Canadian Legion branches are struggling so much. The Naval Club, we've spoken with them. Hard to imagine life without them, but I know a lot of branches have already closed.
And that is a tragedy that this would be allowed to happen. I'm very pleased. My new portfolio with Mr. O'Toole is on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I must say, first of all, I'm just so grateful to veterans who gave everything so that we could have a free and just society. And Canada has always been known as one of the best places in the world to live, and it's something I truly, from my heart, acknowledge. And now, to see our Veterans Association struggling so much, I was able to get local representation on our committee to see what we can do to help these veterans organizations. Way back in the spring, the Legion was asking for $30 million to help them make it through this horrible crisis. The Liberals months later announced $20 million. And to put that into perspective, back when Mr. Trudeau was first elected, he said no veteran, should have to sue their government in order to get the benefits that they deserve. Well, he spent over $43 million suing veterans, and he's only giving the organizations $20 million to make it through this COVID crisis. And we're worried because it may be too little too late for some of our clubs. And the reality is, Deborah, if we don't have these organizations to support our veterans, who's going to do that work? We have veterans who are coming back who've had post-traumatic stress disorder. They need a place to go. The Legions help steer veterans towards Veterans Affairs so that they're aware of the different benefits that they're entitled to. And if we lose these service organizations, who's going to do those jobs? And it was just almost, I felt so horrible that the government is only giving $20 million to veterans organizations, and it balances out $14 million for legions and then $6 million for the other clubs. And as you say so correctly, in Oshawa, we have the Navy Club, we have the 420 Wing, we've got the regiment, the Polish Veterans Associations. All these organizations are really suffering right now. And I just ask the community to go out and support them as much as you can, because there's no greater service than to serve your country, and we owe these veterans more, and we need to do whatever we can.
Okay, we're almost out of time. We've only got about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
I want to talk about some good news. I want to
Yes.
end on some good news, and that's GM returns to vehicle production. Woo-hoo!
Absolutely.
Talk about, was it a big sigh of relief when you heard that? I'll bet.
Oh, you know what? I'm just so grateful that General Motors was able to return production to our plant. We all know what a shock it was when GM made that horrible announcement that we would be closing our plant. The history here in our community is just so strong for the automotive sector, the infrastructure we have here. So with the improved sales for trucks, we were a natural place for GM to look. And I do applaud General Motors Canadian executives, but also the executives locally with Unifor, who sat down and worked out a really great situation that we would be able to bring automotive truck, specifically truck production, back here to Oshawa. So as you quite rightly said, there are a lot of good news stories. I find pandemics like this, situations that challenge us, we get through it. In Canada, we support our friends, we support our neighbors, and most of the time when we have a horrible situation like this, we come back even better. And I know that's going to be the future that we see. This pandemic, all pandemics end, and by working together, I know we're going to be able to get through this. And I'm just hoping that the Christmas wish for our community is that people will get their jobs, they'll be able to hug their relatives, their loved ones, visit the stores and restaurants that they love to hang out at, and just get back to normal. So let's keep those thoughts and prayers close to our heart, and let's all work together to get through this pandemic and have a wonderful Christmas season.
Okay, and on that, I'm going to have to stop you there. We are out of time. Our thanks to Oshawa MP Colin Carrie, and thanks to you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Debra Hutchison. Stay safe, everyone.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
As the first ever winners of the Epic Mac and Cheese competition hosted by Durham College, we're here to show you how to make the award-winning recipe. Today we decided to use ziti noodles, but you can substitute it for any other type of pasta that can hold the sauce. So in order to make the sauce, you're going to need flour, butter, milk, and a little bit of mustard, and of course the most important ingredient, a little bit of Munster cheese.
So first we're going to saute off some onions and garlic. After that we're going to add the margay sausage. At the very end, we're just going to add green onions, roasted red pepper, and mushrooms.